This video is based on negative externalities in consumption. It's just going to be a quick guide on how to draw a diagram. Now, I went on ChatGPT before creating this video and I just asked it to create an image of negative externalities in consumption, and interestingly this is what it came up with. I do think it's quite stereotypical, but still, let's have a look at the types of goods that we see. So we see, for example, alcohol, we see fast food, we see gambling, we see vapes, cigarettes, and all these goods we could also consider to be demerit goods. So demerit goods are those that are overvalued and overconsumed, but they do have negative consequences for the third party. And this is what negative externalities in consumption looks at. So if we think about the third party and who the third party is, the third party is everybody who's indirectly involved. So what I mean by that is outside of the transaction, those who are not involved in the direct purchasing of the good can be negatively impacted by the purchase and consumption of these goods. The first and second party are those directly involved. So they're the ones who are the consumer and the producer who are buying and producing these goods. So let's draw a diagram. So first of all, I'm basing it on consumption. So my main focus is going to be the demand curves. Because that's my main focus, I'm going to just quickly draw the supply curve, and I'm going to draw the supply curve based on the assumption that the marginal social cost equals the marginal private cost. So what do I mean by the marginal private cost? Well, as I've just mentioned, the private cost of those directly involved in the transaction is the first and second party. So it represents the costs incurred by, for example, producers. So if you think about producers of cigarettes, all the raw materials, the expense of them, think about, for example, labour costs, all the cost of all the inputs that goes into producing that good would be shown on this supply curve. Now, the marginal social cost has a formula, and it's the private cost, what I've just mentioned in terms of the first and second party, but it's also adding the external cost. And remember, those are the costs that are associated with the third party, those not directly involved in the transaction. So in other words, it's the costs to society. Now, as I mentioned before, when drawing this supply curve, because my main focus is demand, I'm just assuming that they equal one another. The reality of the situation is they probably don't. But because it's not my focus, the assumption is going to be just simply made based on the externality arising from consumption rather than production. So meaning the market failure, the distortion in the market occurs on the demand side rather than the supply side. So I'm going to draw my first curve, which is my marginal private benefit. Now, this is where the free market operates. So the free market allocation of resources is where the marginal private benefit equals the marginal private cost. So the marginal private benefit represents the benefits that consumers receive from consuming the good. So in other words, let's say the marginal utility, the satisfaction that they receive. So it reflects the demand curve in the free market. So when we're looking at negative externalities in consumption, this Q1, the resources and everything in terms of the allocation of this good is not considering the impact on the third party. It's not considering the impact on society. And it's considered to be over-consumption or over-consumed. So if we have a look at now at the marginal social benefit, we can see that society benefits less than those of the first and second party. So the marginal social benefit, when that equals the marginal social cost, that is the social optimum output. So the marginal social benefit is that of the private benefit plus the external benefit. Now, as we can see, because it is below the private benefit, we can almost see that this is a negative gain. So what I mean by negative gain, it is a cost to society, hence why it's below that of the private benefit. The fact that social benefit is private benefit plus external benefit, it must mean that society is not benefiting from it and the third party is actually being made worse off because of what is taking place. Now, what we can see is this arrow So at Q1, where the free market allocation is, we can see that the arrow is highlighting the difference in benefits between that of the private benefit plus the external benefit and that of just the private benefit. So like I said, that's just pretty much emphasizing the cost to society. At Q2, just a reminder that this is a deadweight loss because at Q2, P2, that is a socially efficient equilibrium. So if we want to avoid the market failure or reduce the market failure, we have to reduce that area. So the free market allocation is Q1, the socially efficient equilibrium is Q2. So again, just a reminder, this is negative externalities in consumption. There is an overconsumption in the market, and that is what is causing the deadweight loss and the market failure.